The call came in at 0340, and by the time Sergeant First Class Marcus Hollis had his team staged at the base of the debris field, the mountain was already doing what mountains do when they decide to fall, settling, sighing, grinding stone against stone in the dark, as if the whole slope were trying to swallow what was left of Firebase Crest Falls Forward Supply Depot. 19 soldiers were somewhere inside it. Hollis had been running search and rescue for 11 years. He had worked avalanche fields in Alaska, collapses in Germany, a fall in South Carolina after a freak gas event. He knew the math. After 8 hours beneath a debris field of this density, the window was not closing, it was closed. His people were still working because you did not stop working. You worked because 19 families existed somewhere in the country behind him, and he was not the man who went home and told them he had stopped trying. The first dog team had gone in at 0400. Shepherd mix, 4 years certified, experienced handler. The dog had quartered the southern grid twice and flagged nothing confirmed. The second team, a German shepherd named Bravo and a handler named Corporal Wes Dunn, who Hollis respected, had gone into the eastern face at 0630 and flagged 2 pockets, both false voids when the probe team reached them. The third team had been cycled out at 0900, the handler exhausted, the dog too hot and stressed to read cleanly. And then there was Marsh. Marsh was a Belgian Malinois, 8 years old, and he was the most decorated search dog the unit had ever run. His confirmed find record was 17, his loss record 0. He had worked collapses in 3 countries. He did not false flag, he did not spook, he did not lock up. He was locked up. He had been sitting at a point along the western slab face for 6 hours, not lying down, not working a grid, sitting, ears forward, spine straight, absolutely still, staring at a section of the collapsed concrete face with the focused intensity of a dog who has already made up his mind and is simply waiting for the humans to catch up. 3 handlers had tried to move him. A senior handler had tried to redirect him with commands, food reward, with physical coaxing. Marsh had not moved. He had turned his head once to look at the senior handler, then turned back to the slab. Nobody alive could explain it. Hollis had made the call at 1100. Not a call he had wanted to make, because making it meant admitting his team had hit a wall. He had pulled the regional SAR contractor list, filtered for K9 credentials and mountain experience, and made one call. The contractor's file said former Army, former handler, SAR certified. The file did not say much else. There was a sealed component that Hollis had no clearance to access, and he had not bothered to dig further. He needed someone who could reach the dog. He did not need a biography. He had been expecting a man. He acknowledged that to himself later. Honestly, without excuses. He had been emptying a weathered man in his 40s with a handler's accent and a dog of his own. What arrived at 1124 was a young woman, maybe early 30s, in a worn field vest that had seen a hard number of working seasons. She had a battered canvas kit bag on one shoulder and no dog. She walked up the access road with the deliberate economy of someone who had been moving across difficult terrain her whole adult life and had stopped noticing it. She looked at the debris field first. Not at Hollis, not at the staging area, not at the team. She looked at the mountain, just for a moment, reading it, then she looked at Hollis. "Vance," she said. "Where's the dog?" Hollis had 11 years on her. Easy, he had ribbons she probably couldn't name, he said, with genuine professional restraint. "The asset is along the western face. He's been non-responsive to handler commands for 6 hours. We've cycled 3 teams. I need to be direct with you. This is a long shot and time is critical. If you can't move him in 10 minutes, we go to mechanical probe." She had already started walking toward the western face. She said, "Show me." Hollis walked her to where Marsh was sitting. The dog did not react to their approach. He was exactly as Hollis had left him, ears forward, locked on the slab, waiting. Vance stopped 6 feet from the dog and did not approach further. She looked at him for a long moment. Not at the slab he was watching, at the dog. She watched the angle of his ears, the set of his shoulders, the exact point along the slab face where his eyes were fixed. She crouched, slowly. To his eye level she looked where he was looking, then she said one word. Not loudly. Not as a command exactly. More like someone speaking a name they hadn't used in a long time, but still knew perfectly. The word was in Czech. Hollis spoke no Czech. He did not know that it was Czech. He learned later that it was the dog's original working language from his first 18 months of foundation training, before he had been handed to the unit, before the English language commands had become his standard. He learned later that only one handler in the unit's history had ever worked Marsh in Czech, and that handler had left service 3 years ago. He learned later that the dog had not heard that particular call word, the word forward, show me, in 37 months. Marsh stood up. He did not look at Vance. He walked directly to the slab and began moving laterally along it, nose working low. He moved 12 feet to the left, then angled into a crack in the debris face. Pushing his nose deep into the shadow, he sat. He looked back at Vance. She was already moving. Hollis called to her, his voice carrying the controlled urgency of a man whose team was 30 seconds behind her. She was at the crack in the slab before he finished the sentence, hands running the edges of a section that the probe teams had assessed and marked as structurally unsound for entry. She did not enter recklessly. She worked quickly and with precision, pulling 2 pieces of secondary debris clear with her hands. Opening a gap that the structural assessment had assumed was too tight. She was small enough and she knew exactly what she was doing. The first voice came up from inside the gap 20 seconds later. It was a young soldier's voice, cracked with dust and exhaustion, saying the only thing a person trapped for 8 hours with no light can say when they hear the world on the other side of the rock move. It said, "Hello?" "I've got you," Vance said, flat, certain. Like she was finishing a sentence she had started 8 hours ago and it had never been in doubt. She pulled the first soldier, a young specialist, barely 20, coated in dust, through the gap herself, while Hollis's team reached her position and began bracing the entry point. The second soldier followed in under 3 minutes, guided out by Vance's voice and her hand on his wrist through the gap. The third the team extracted together, once the entry was shored, and then Marsh moved again. He quartered north along the debris face, flagged a second pocket sat, moved again, flagged a third. He was running a grid that 3 certified teams had failed to run, and he was running it like a machine that had been waiting for the right operator. Turn the key. Vance moved with him, calling his position back to the extraction teams, reading his signals with the calm fluency of someone who had been reading that particular dog for years. And she had trained Marsh herself in his first rotation. She had built the foundation that had made him the dog he was, and then she had left service, and Marsh had kept working without her, and apparently some part of him had never entirely resolved that. At 13:47, the 19th soldier came out of the debris field on a stretcher, conscious, calling for water. The mountain had given back everything it had taken. Hollis was sitting on a staging crate with his tablet when the K9 unit commander arrived on site. A captain named Adler, who had driven 90 minutes from the regional K9 facility when the extraction numbers started coming in. Hollis had finally pulled Vance's full credentials in the system. The sealed component of her file had required a call to a duty officer at a regional Army Records Center who had pulled the file under Emergency Operational Authority and read Hollis one sentence before cutting the call. Handler Vance, Petra A., holds the unit's all-time confirmed find record, 23 finds, 0 losses, and completed the Mountain Search and Rescue Specialist course as the youngest woman ever to do so. Bird remains unsealed for operational reference. 3 finds, 0 losses. Hollis set the tablet on the crate and looked across the staging area at the young woman who was sitting beside. Marsh on the ground, not talking to anyone, letting the dog lean against her leg. She had her hand on the back of his neck. The dog's eyes were closed. Captain Adler walked to the supply bag he had carried from his vehicle and removed its small case. He carried it across the staging area to where Vance was sitting. She looked up when he stopped in front of her. He opened the case. Inside it was a handler's challenge coin. Matte black finish, the unit's working dog insignia on one face. A worn edge on the right side where a thumb had turned it 1,000 times. It was the coin that had been logged into the unit's property book the day Vance had cleared out of service, turned in with the rest of her gear, stored in a supply case for 3 years. Adler had pulled it when Hollis's call came in at 1100, on instinct. Because he had been Vance's section commander in her last year, and some things you carry even when you don't know why. He held it out to her. She looked at it for a moment. Then she took it. Adler straightened. He came to attention and saluted her. Not a casual courtesy, but a full, deliberate salute, the kind that means the thing it is supposed to mean. Then he said quietly, "Welcome back, Vance." Around the staging area, without any command being given, the extraction team began to stand. Handlers, medics, engineers, probe team that had been cycling for 8 hours. They stood, one by one, facing her. Not because anyone ordered it. Because 19 men and women were breathing mountain air, who had not been expected to see the next hour, and the reason they were breathing was sitting on the ground 30 feet away with her hand on a dog's neck and a coin in her palm. Hollis stood last. He removed his cover and held it against his chest. An old gesture, the kind a man makes at a graveside or a flagpole, the kind that costs him something. He stood that way for a long moment, looking across the staging area at Petra Vance and the dog who had waited for her. Then he looked up at the mountain, which had given back what it took, and he thought about 11 years of work, and what it meant to be humbled by someone you had almost sent home. He put his cover back on. He did not say anything. There was nothing to say that the dog hadn't already said, sitting at that slab for 8 hours, waiting for the only person who had ever truly known how to listen to him.